Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to be covering a variety of subjects. I'm going to be looking at, are smartphones now becoming an obsolete technology and what might be possibly replacing that? I'm going to be looking at any progress regarding direct-to-cell communications. Going to be looking at the consciousness ID and a new layer called RealNose that may or may not be added to that concept going forward. I'm also going to be looking at the United States Space Force and the Worldwide Military Peace Plan Doctrine. And I'm also going to be looking at Donald Trump's tariffs and any progress or sections of GESARA which might now be coming to light, including lower working weeks and the baby bonus. So I hope you are going to really enjoy everything, and let's just get started. So the first thing I wanted to look at today was I saw something from Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, where he was declaring that there's going to be an end to mobile phones and that there's going to be new tech that's going to be replacing them. And he went on to say in a statement that in this bold prediction, it says that smartphones, the device we rely on daily, may soon become obsolete, and that a new technology is emerging, which is promising to replace screens and revolutionize how we interact with the digital world. He goes on to say that in less than a decade, he predicts that smart glasses will take over our main connection to the digital world, making smartphones a thing of the past. He's also saying that the race has begun between Meta, Apple, and other tech giants who are pouring billions into something called augmented reality, or AR, and artificial intelligence, or AI, to make this future a reality. So they're asking the questions, are we really ready to ditch our phones forever? So I wanted to have a look at that. So the first question I asked was, are smartphones becoming obsolete? And they actually said to me, yes, smartphones are now old technology, and that in the future, calls will be commanded by our voice, and a holographic image will be used to see the recipient. And I said, will this be done through AR, augmented reality, in addition to AI, artificial intelligence? And I said, and will it be while we're using something like, say, smart glasses? And they said, not exactly. They said it will be some sort of wearable tech, which is less invasive than smart glasses, although these will also be an option. They said the new technologies will be direct to cell, so that means they'll speak directly to the satellites, and that communication towers will not be necessary. So the towers that we currently have, the 4G, 5G towers, they're saying those won't be necessary because the new technologies will speak directly to satellite. They said the commands to the new wearable tech will mostly be via voice control. But they did say that later the consciousness ID, i.e. the consciousness signatures, will also be implemented. And I said, is the Q phone already adapted to these settings? And they said no. They said the Q phone is a different type of communication tech which will run only for the government officials or ambassadors in certain areas of the new government setups. They said that Q phones will have a unique layer of cybersecurity and that their security will be set at the highest level of clearance. They said the Q phones are likely to be adaptable to satellite direct-to-cell systems and or towers or military communication systems like Mars. Now, I've spoken about the Mars radio system before. It stands for Military Auxiliary Radio System. And in the past, when I've asked about when Elon Musk is talking about Mars, if he's talking about the planet Mars or this system, this military auxiliary radio system, they've told me that he's actually referring to both. So the Q phone will also be able to run under the military auxiliary radio system. So it sounds like the Q phones can run in multiple ways. And again, I did ask, when Musk talks about Mars, does he mean the planet Mars or the military communications setup called Mars? And they said that he is referring to both concepts interchangeably. I said, when will smartphones be out of date for the public? And they said it could be as soon as 2027 and 2028. I said, so the new wearable tech, which can make calls to satellite, when will that be available to the public? They said as early as 26, 27, and 28. 2026, 2027, 2028. And I said, will Apple lead in this innovation? And they said, it is likely that a collaboration between tech companies like Google will bring together different areas of expertise. So they'll devise this innovations together. And an example might be, for instance, that you might have Google, Apple, and even say someone like Sam Altman from OpenAI sort of collaborating all together. And I said, is it likely to be the technological transition team that are working on this project? And they said it is likely to be the technological transition team that Trump has put together who will be working on this project. You can find out more in my previous videos about the technological transition team. So while we're on the subject of direct-to-cell technology, Ofcom on the 25th of March have announced that the UK will be the first country in Europe to move ahead with innovative plans for standard smartphones to make satellite calls. They said that the Ofcom proposals would enable mobile networks and satellite operators to connect customers from space, and that people and businesses in hard-to-reach areas will benefit the most. They're saying that cutting-edge direct-to-device technology means that satellites in space can now begin to beam signals straight to your standard smartphone so that they can make calls, send texts, and connect to the internet when there is no coverage from your mobile masts on the ground. Previously, mobile satellite services from space have mainly been available to a niche group of users. For example, if you're on a ship or an aircraft, and then these special handsets have been expensive. They're saying that with this becoming more widely available, it would help connect the UK's most rural and hard to reach places. And this could mean getting a signal to remote villages and mountains, and could provide a vital backup option during outages. They're saying that given advances in this technology, Ofcom is proposing to allow mobile networks and satellite operators to use mobile airwaves called radio spectrum to connect the mainstream handsets in the UK.
Ring ring, calling from space.
Did you know you could soon make satellite calls from your normal smartphone? This is thanks to new proposals made by Ofcom. This cutting-edge tech, called direct-to-device, would mean that satellites in space can now beam signal directly to your mobile, so you can make calls, send texts, or connect directly to the internet when there are no nearby masts. This will keep you connected everywhere.
Before this was only available on premium smartphones and on specialist kit designed for ships
and aircraft. Now this could help the UK's most rural and hard-to-reach areas, so you can get signal in remote villages or even up a mountain. It could also help back up mobile coverage during a power outage and improve emergency 999 services in mobile hotspots.
So staying on the subject of technology, I then came across this article under NATO Diana. As I've said in my previous videos, Diana stands for the Defence Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. And what I've recently found when I've been looking at the consciousness ID and how that might be developing, I found that NATO Diana have come up with some innovations, one of them being called RealNose. What they're saying in these articles is that one of Diana's challenges or areas of challenge this year is to focus on human health and performance. And they're saying that whether it's breakthroughs in AI and bioinformatics that enable more personalized care, or next generation wearable technology that allows individuals to recover from injury, this challenge offers an opportunity to leverage technology to help build a more peaceful future. So what they're saying is that Diana's crucial challenge areas are where they focus on human health and performance, and that when they talk about dual use technology, that they're aiming to address challenges in innovation where it can be used not just for defense purposes, but also for civilians. And that they want to find better tools and better treatments on a diagnostic level, which could help in patient care to improve public health, but that it could also be adapted for, say, defense purposes. Now, I did make a video some time ago where they were saying that the nanotech that may be in people's systems from, say, vaccines, that will be used in the field to identify what injuries or biotoxins or possibly what events have happened to a military person in the field in, say, an emergency. They would be able to link into that biotechnology, which would be already in the person's system, and it would be able to identify quickly what was internally going on with the soldier in the event of an injury or a bioweapon attack. So they already have something set up to work with the biotech that's in people's, that may be already in people's systems. So this new innovation called RealNose is a pioneering machine in olfaction. Now, olfaction comes from olfactory. Olfactory is the system of smell that we have in our body. Basically the smell and how it then computes with the brain. It's the olfactory system. Now, this RealNose company, they are based in Boston, and they are talking about triggering something called molecular renaissance with their technology. And what they're saying is that we're about to unlock the world of odor molecules, which is extremely rich. They're saying that we're used to seeing things and hearing things, but as humans, we are not fine-tuned to the smell of things. And they're saying that by integrating AI and bio-nanotechnology, then the RealNose solution works by mimicking how a dog uses their sense of smell to detect disease through scent signatures. They're saying that canine noses are much more sensitive than human noses, allowing dogs to detect certain diseases with incredible accuracy, and that the electronic nose is being developed by RealNose using lab-made versions of the protein receptors that are found in mammals' noses, and that these receptors are extremely sensitive and work like tiny sensors which are able to identify unique chemical fingerprints or scent signatures in the air. Now, when I was reading this, the first thing that came to my mind was, could this concept be part of the Q consciousness ID, which I've been talking about for some time? Could this be a way that we would have, in addition to all the other things like retina scan, fingerprint, DNA, could the scent signature be unique to each of us and help to aid in creating this consciousness ID passcode, which would mean that when we have the new technologies, that the technology will be able to read these layers of our unique signature, including the scent signature, and be able to open the technology that we're using. So I wanted to channel this down, and I said, can you explain about RealNose and how it could be used, how it can be utilized? They said to me that RealNose is an AI system that can read energy signatures in a person's auric field or toroidal field, and then it can turn it into a pattern which resembles a smell signature. So I asked them, so you can't actually smell through the technology, but the quantum pattern of the smell can be identified. And they said, exactly. And I said, so is each person's quantum smell signature, is it unique? And they said in most cases it is, yes. They said there could be a few anomalies, say if people were twins, but at this stage of development, that is currently unknown. I said, will the quantum smell signature become part of our unique consciousness ID? And they said, yes. They said, in the future, it will be part of many layers of data that is personal to each individual to create a quantum passcode. And I said, will this be how we access or open our personal data in the future? Like, for instance, our banking? They said, yes. The new Q financial system will use a quantum personal signature or a personal consciousness ID, and it will be multi-layered. And they'll use things like, obviously, your consciousness, that might be your delta brain waves, which is the sleep pattern wave. They might use your retina scan, your fingerprint, your DNA, and they might also now include RealNose or quantum scent signature. So if you think about all of those things combined, your delta wave, your retina scan, your fingerprint, your DNA, and your quantum scent signature, you're now getting a unique, personalized consciousness ID.
Dr. Mershon, it's a pleasure to have you on QED at Dr. B with us. So this show is about animals and what we as humans can learn from them. So dogs can actually smell or detect cancer through the nose. Is that correct?
It is very true. They're to this date the earliest, cheapest, fastest, and most accurate detectors of many diseases, including many cancers. After a few weeks of training done by professionals, these dogs become extremely accurate. It is embarrassing to me to have access to all this fantastic equipment. Over $100 million worth of it. Between me and my collaborators, we have all this equipment in our hands. And the trained dog puts us to shame when it comes to cancer diagnosis. It does it better, faster, cheaper, and more accurately. You will see now there's dogs at sporting events and even at airports detecting COVID. The same way that they detect contraband, drugs, foods that are not allowed, etc. And in England, they've shown that they can detect COVID in the wild environment of the airport, where there's all sorts of smells with 99% precision, 0.4 seconds per person.
How do they do it? What is happening in their nose or their brain? What's the process that they're able to detect cancer or other diseases?
We were actually, for the first maybe half of this project, operating under the wrong assumption. What we thought the dogs were doing in identifying cancer is finding a biomarker. That means finding a specific molecule or set of molecules. However, we found out that that's not the case. So we're in that level now where we're still not entirely understand, but where the current understanding is that your body scent is sort of like the sand on the beach. Many different sand particles, many colors individually. And then cancer leaves footprints on that body odor that the dogs can pick up on. They're not picking up on any one sand particle. They're not picking up on any one biomarker, any one specific molecule, because different cancers have different volatiles. That means different volatiles come off of the tissue, but every cancer affects the body it appears to be, at least to the dogs, to be generalizable. That means if you teach the dog to find bladder cancer, we have cases where they generalize automatically with no additional training to, let's say, breast cancer. Now, we know the two tissues are very far apart. As far as we know, they don't have any identical volatiles. So what we think is happening is the dog can tell the footprints of cancer in your body odor in general without having to depend on specific biomarkers. And in fact, the whole game is to figure out how do you make a machine that is just like the dogs.
So let's talk about that. So you figured this out by understanding and studying dogs. Transfer that to the technology the MIT knows, and then the future applications for this.
We were building the MIT RealNose. This is an electronic device that attempts to mimic the dogs. So the technology has two steps. The first step is to detect odorants at very low concentration and high performance. Now, we built all this thinking that we eventually would have to train it molecule by molecule and make it spit out analytical information. And in our rush to create this technology, we deployed something else, which had this algorithm where it didn't look for individual molecules, it would just look for patterns. And I thought it was a hack, but it ended up being the hack. In fact, we realized this already works like a nose. It tells us the patterns are the same. It tells us these two things smell the same, and that was enough. In fact, that was the key. So here is a clear case where the dogs are teaching the humans. I want to bring that technology to our cell phones. What we're doing is we're training an artificial intelligence. The algorithm that we've published can do about the same as the dogs, so in the high 70s. Now, it's not enough. It should be 99%. And we know dogs can get there, so the machine has got to get there too before we start deploying it, because we can get there. And we should not accept for anything below 99%.
You're going to show me some of this technology, correct?
Yeah.
So walk me through it.
Okay, so this is the last prototype that we have. So if you look at here, we have 4 pads. Each of them takes 2 different receptors. They're protected with gaskets. And then gas comes through here, and it gets analyzed in these 8 different sensors. This technology can be shrunk even further, but already you see it's still smaller than my entire cell phone. And it's actually much thinner than what you see here. All this that you see here already exists in the smartphone. These little things, they're tiny little glass chips.
Yeah.
And those are like little SIM cards. Now, currently, the most finicky part about this is still the biological component. So just like your own nose gets replenished every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks you get a new epithelium. So similar to this, it will last for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Then you must take this out, this little SIM card out, and put it in again. So it's both a disadvantage and an opportunity. It's an opportunity for business because you can have the razor blade model where you program these little chips biologically, and you say, today I want to find cancer, tomorrow I want to find a different cancer, I want to find COVID, here, buy the different cartridge that I've created. So you have to keep putting different cartridges in your phone. My dream is to one day transition from this film-like technology to a digital technology. This does not exist yet. Nobody has figured out how to smell without biology yet, or without some kind of chemical sensing yet.
But are there any ethical considerations we need to pay attention to?
You are constantly leaving behind a trail of molecules that tells me everything about you. If I really take this all the way, then I would be able to point my phone at you. I'd have to put it pretty close, but I'd be able to know, let's say, if you're pregnant, what sex you're carrying, what you've smoked, eaten, or drank, who you've been around. These are very, very potent pieces of information that you might not want to share with me, with anybody, any random stranger. Also, you might not trust the machine that collects this data about you and have it in your pocket all day long, and then some dark conglomerate enterprise is mining your data and making a lot of money. If we don't get ahead of this, there is a risk that this technology will never come to us, because people are already very sensitized about being filmed, about being recorded for their audio. Now I'm telling you, oh, I also want to record your smells. That sounds like a huge violation of privacy, right? Unless you can trust this technology, you will not want to buy that phone. And if you don't want to buy that phone, no company is going to make that phone. So we're trying to find this space where companies can make money and humans can be protected.
Thank you for having us in your MIT lab.
Thank you so much for coming.
So I found this very interesting article also from Italian scientists that have achieved a breakthrough by making light behave like a super solid. And it's a rare state of matter that flows like a liquid, but maintains its shape like a solid. They're saying that their research, which has been published in Nature journal, could deepen our understanding of light and quantum physics, and that by using a special semiconductor at extremely low temperature, they observed light forming structured patterns similar to supersolids. So I wondered if this new liquid that can appear as a solid or as a solid shape might be the way that these new augmented reality technologies might work in the future, or could it be part of that system? So when Mark Zuckerberg was explaining that we're going to use augmented reality and that we're not going to use smartphone technology like we do today, but we're going to have a different type of way of making connections to people. And that could be, say, a holographic image. So I wanted to know if this liquid that can maintain its shape like a solid might be the way that the holographic image is devised. Obviously, I don't understand quantum physics, but I just thought it was an interesting concept. So I said the Italian scientific breakthrough of making light appear as a solid shape, is that going to be the technology that helps with the new communications that are going to replace the smartphones? And what they said to me was, in some cases, it may be possible to use this type of technology in the future, particularly with communications equipment. And I said, will this be available to the public? And they said not until around 2032 to 2036. So it'd be interesting to see how these holographic communication systems that are commanded by voice and that don't necessitate an actual smartphone in our hand. It'd be interesting to see how that all unfolds. So the next thing I just wanted to take a look at was this announcement from Trump, where he said the operation is over, the patient lived and is healing. The prognosis is that the patient will be far stronger, bigger, better, and more resilient than ever before. Make America great again. So I asked them, what was Trump referring to when he said the operation is over? The operation was the coming together of all significant world leaders so that they could sign into and agree to participate in the worldwide military peace plan, whilst realigning each of their region's digital finances and platforms and their economic strategies so that they can bring back regional and cultural strength. They said that where Trump says the patient lived and is healing, this refers to the world moving through all of this setting up stage in order to now be, as Trump says, far stronger, bigger, better, and more resilient than ever, so that they can make America great again. And I said, will the MAGA concept be adopted in all of the military regions of the Worldwide Military Peace Plan, which we know they are categorized as the North, South, East, and West region? And they said that the MAGA concept will be adopted in all of those regions. So some time ago, I talked about the Worldwide Military Peace Plan. And at that time, because we're going back probably nearly three, maybe 4 years ago, I didn't know what the specific document was that resembled the doctrines and protocols and regulations of the Worldwide Military Peace Plan. I didn't know what that was. I did know about the Artemis Accords. I've reported that on my videos. The Artemis Accords is where people sign in to regulations and protocols if they're operating in space and they're not military related. So, for instance, private organizations and companies and governments maybe might have to sign into the Artemis Accords in order to be able to operate in space. The Space Forces would be under a different type of regulation, the Worldwide Military Peace Plan. And I've now found this document called the Space Force Doctrine document of the Space Force. And that this was unveiled by the Chief of Space Operations General Chance Saltzman during his February keynote. The SFDD1, the Space Force Doctrine Document 1, codifies who we are, why we fight, and how we operate alongside the joint force. So I wanted to know if this Space Force Doctrine document was the document that I hadn't known about before, and if this is actually it. This is the rules and regulations that are going to be adopted under the Worldwide Military Peace Plan. So in the foreword, they state that the Space Force Doctrine Document 1 is the Space Force codifies why we exist as a service and who we are as guardians and how we employ space power to drive the success of the joint force. And this is to ensure unity of effort, and it is essential that each of us fully internalizes these concepts and embodies them as we engage with the entirety of the joint force, our allies, and our partners. So the 6 points are that Space Force capabilities are critical to the joint force and the American way of life, that the Space Force must defend its capabilities or the joint force will be unable to project power. The Space Force must protect the joint combined force from space-enabled targeting, or the joint combined force will be unable to meet military objectives. Space is a war-fighting domain, not a collection of supporting activities. The Space Force is responsible for organizing, training, and equipping critical space capabilities, but it is also responsible for performance of war-fighting operations as an integral part of the joint force. And guardians are uniquely and specifically trained, educated, and experienced in warfighting activities in, from, and to the space domain. And in the table of contents, it refers to the relationship to other government agencies, the relationship to allies and international partners, and the relationship to commercial and academic partners, amongst other things. So I'll put this document in the links below. So I wanted to ask some questions around this Space Force doctrine. I said, is this going to be the foundational roles and values that will be implemented and sustained in order to create the worldwide military peace plan? And they said to me that the Space Force doctrine has already been in effect for a number of years in the background, but is now officially recognized as a peace plan as we move into a fully integrated space economy, both domestically and from a military and defense perspective. And I said, what is the Space Force doctrine designed to do? They said the Space Force doctrine is the outlined obligations and objectives of how to operate and maneuver through space as we go forward. They said that all regions, north, south, east, and west, will need to abide to the regulations of the doctrine in each region in order to uphold the protocols of the peace plan on a worldwide basis. I said, will the worldwide military peace plan be able to still operate in the capacity of overseeing activity in sister nation regions so that we can ensure that the doctrine guidelines are not breached? And they said, yes. They said the point of the Space Force doctrine is that its guiding principles will be adopted by each military region worldwide, thus enacting a worldwide military peace plan. And I said, will sanctions be imposed to the space domain regions should part of the military space area be violated, i.e. if, say, some other region of the world didn't carry out the specific protocols or guidelines of the doctrine, could sanctions then be applied? And they said yes. The Space Force setup is designed so that each region can effectively oversee each other. They effectively monitor and oversee each sister area within the military setup. Although the space domain or space law is still in its early stages of being regulated under the Space Force doctrine, it is envisioned that to breach the protocols of space law in any military region of the worldwide military peace plan could incur a sanction or a penalty to the operations, both in the domain of space itself and in its corresponding military region on the ground. So an example might be, for instance, that if a region breaches the space and land protocols of the worldwide military peace plan, then a sanction could be imposed which may lead to restrictions of the star shield capacity or restrictions of cybersecurity measures where applicable, which could leave a region vulnerable in its IT or quantum computing infrastructure, which could then affect its operations in terms of banking, communications, or travel. And I asked them, how does the Artemis Accords fit together with this Space Force doctrine? They said to me that the Artemis Accords are a set of protocols or regulations on how private organizations operate in the space domain, and that the Space Force doctrine is a set of protocols and regulations on how the military and the military guardians should operate in space and under space law.
What is Space Force doctrine? Imagine a world where the vastness of space is not just a frontier for exploration but a domain for national security and defense. As technology advances, the need for a structured approach to operations in space becomes increasingly important. This is where Space Force Doctrine comes into play. Space Force Doctrine refers to the guiding principles and strategies that govern the operations and activities of the United States Space Force. It serves as a framework for how the Space Force conducts its missions, ensuring that all actions align with national defense objectives and the broader goals of the United States military. At its core, Space Force Doctrine outlines the roles and responsibilities of the Space Force in protecting American interests in space. This includes everything from satellite operations to space surveillance and missile warning systems. The doctrine emphasizes the importance of space as a critical domain, similar to land, sea, and air, and recognizes the need for effective strategies to deter threats and respond to challenges in this environment. The development of Space Force Doctrine is not a one-time effort. It is an evolving process that adapts to new technologies, emerging threats, and changes in the geopolitical landscape. It incorporates lessons learned from past military operations and seeks to integrate space capabilities with other branches of the armed forces. In summary, Space Force Doctrine is essential for establishing a clear and coherent approach to space operations. It ensures that the United States can maintain its strategic advantage in an increasingly contested space environment, safeguarding national security and supporting global stability.
A hot topic at the moment seems to be around the tariffs that President Trump is introducing for the USA. So I wanted to find out a bit more information around tariffs. I have talked about them a bit in previous videos. I wanted to know what the worldwide implications would be surrounding this tariff implementation in the USA. They said to me that the effects of tariffs is twofold. So the first point is to allow for these tariffs to reduce personal taxation on the citizens in all areas and regions of the worldwide military peace plan, so that the steps in the new GESARA financial plan can be devolved to the people. They're saying that the tariffs will replace personal taxation in all the countries who adopt this tariff setup. The second point is, they said that the tariffs are about the regions pulling back from imported goods where possible and building strength from within based on their own natural resource, the skill sets of their citizens, and the natural culture of their regions. So I said, will all regions eventually adopt this tariff setup? And they said yes. And I said, so Trump is again leading the charge and taking the backlash for international change. And they said, what are the other implications of the tariffs? As each region begins to set tariffs and concentrate on developing its strengths economically based on its own, say, natural reserves or resources and its civilian skill sets, each region will then become less dependent on the other regions, say, financially. And so power play will be reduced. And as areas become strong and independent, not just financially, but through a fair worldwide military peace plan, there will be fairness and balance in political and military power. And if all regions are equally strong in their independent ability to generate a devolved policy to the people, whilst also maintaining their financial stability through tariffs and their military stability through the worldwide military peace plan, then they're saying a new setup for equal and fair trade will pursue, and that this new foundation should lead to a more stable world in terms of peace. They're saying as the power gets devolved to the people and the regions develop strength in their own right, then world peace will ensue. They're saying that all economies and cultures will be strong in their own right. So now I was drawn to this this White House fact sheet, where President Trump wanted to ensure national security and economic resilience through Section 232 regarding actions on processed critical minerals and derivative products. And President Trump had signed an executive order where he's investigating national security risks because of the reliance on imported processed critical minerals and their derivative products. So I wanted to ask, so if countries hold critical minerals, for example, China has minerals called gallium, germanium, and antimony, for example. So what I wanted to know was, if each region is going to be strong in its own right, then as President Trump was highlighting in his executive order, how may this affect the transportation or the imports or the sharing of critical minerals that might be necessary in order to avoid any national security risks, should these, for example, these minerals not be available? So what they said to me was that all critical resources will be written into the space peace doctrines on a worldwide basis and assessed as assets in the quantum virtual vault. And so the distribution of essential assets worldwide, whether that be these critical resources like these minerals or other assets like, say, could be oil or gas, for example, it will all be relevant in how the digital assets and the military protocols are organized. So they're saying that it is in everyone's interests that they work within the protocols and doctrines of the worldwide peace plan, which are all the space forces signing in from each region. They're saying that the new worldwide digital financial system, which is overseen by Q Cybersecurity, will be allocated via the quantum virtual vault, so that digital asset is fairly reflected into each military region, and that this will also include birthright income to every citizen worldwide. So what it seems to be saying is that if a country has any asset, valuable asset, whether it be a critical mineral or an asset like oil or gas or gold or diamonds or whatever the asset may be, that it still gets reflected into the quantum virtual vault in order to have its value assessed. And then that value is divided up around the world, as we know, into digital currency. Now, I've explained this before in my quantum virtual vault videos. I will put the links below again so you can do a recap on how that all works. And it would seem that these critical minerals are also going to be part of that setup, part of that distribution. And it would appear that in order to be part of the worldwide military peace plan, that you do need to adhere to certain protocols and regulations regarding your critical assets in each military region. So I recently saw something where it seemed to be suggesting for GESARA is how the USA may be considering reducing its working week to just 32 hours per week. So people will work a maximum of 32 hours a week. And I said, I wanted to ask a question about this to see what they would say. I said, there's been recommendations about reducing the work week in the USA to 32 hours per week maximum. And will the birthright income essentially subsidize the loss in earnings? And they said, yes, that is the strategy. The strategy is to reduce the working hours so that people can enjoy more leisure time and family time as we move our consciousness into the golden age. And another thing I've seen talked about this week is something called the baby bonus, where I understand it's being proposed that an amount of, say, $5,000 is paid to a parent on the birth of a baby. And I wanted to know, is the baby bonus also supposed to help people move more towards these sort of family and cultural activities so that we can raise the consciousness for the golden age? And they said yes. They said the baby bonus is all part of a wider strategy to encourage lower working hours and more focus on the family unit as we move into the golden age and higher consciousness. So I hope you really liked that information today. As usual, thank you all very much for supporting me, as I'm still not able to post anything political or any of these things I talk about here today are very difficult for me to put on YouTube. So I'm still having to work with the locals.com platform. So thank you all for sticking with me. I had been quite unwell recently. I had pneumonia for a month. And so I was having difficulty with breathing. I had a very bad ear infection and I couldn't stop coughing. And I did actually have to have 2 sets of antibiotic treatments. And I did actually need to call the doctor a number of times. So I'm back up to speed now. And if you have any sort of questions regarding today's video or any topics that you would like me to look at, please put them in the comments below. I'm currently looking at some information around the flat earth concept. And I would just want to say thank you to everybody that responded to my request for information about that. What I've done is I've put all that information in a different folder, and I'm going to work my way through getting some sort of understanding about this flat earth concept, so I know which questions to ask. Because in channeling, it's very important to have the questions directed in a certain way so that you don't skew the answers. It's very important for me not to put my own personal energy into anything I'm channeling. So I actually don't have any sort of personal preference or interest in whether the earth is flat or round, actually. But because I get asked that question a lot, I thought I would just have a look at it. So I will be looking at that in the next few weeks to see if I can channel any information around that topic. In the meantime, you can obviously also support me at Telegram and my website, which is goldenheavenonearth.net. I currently have some slots available for angel soul readings, and you can also book me if you are a professional manager or business and you would like help with your strategic goals, and you would like me to look intuitively around your business concept or where you're headed, or even if you want some personal advice or some personal spiritual development, then obviously you can contact me regarding that also. So until next time, thank you all very much and take care. Bye for now.
I was a teenager. I had like an existential crisis to try to figure out what's the meaning of life. It doesn't seem to be any meaning. For me, at least, the religious texts, and I read all of them that I get my hands on, did not seem convincing. Then I started reading the philosophers. Be careful of like reading German philosophers as a teenager. It's definitely not going to help with your depression. So reading Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, I'm like, now, as an adult, it's much more manageable. But as a kid, you're like, whoa. So then I was like, man, I'm just like struggling to find meaning in life here. And then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and basically what Douglas Adams was saying is that we don't really know what the right questions are to ask. Like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Earth, it turns out, is a big computer and its goal is to answer the question, what's the meaning of life? And Earth comes up with the answer 42. In that book, which is really sort of a book about, it's an existential philosophy book disguised as humor, they come to the conclusion that no, the real problem is trying to formulate the question. And to really have the right question, you need a much bigger computer than Earth. And so maybe like one way of characterizing this would be to say, the universe is the answer. What is the question? Or what are the questions? The more we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness, the better we can understand what questions to ask about the answer that is the universe. And the more we can expand consciousness, become a multi-planet species, ultimately a multicellular species, we have a chance of figuring out what the hell's going on. And so, and this is why I think we should have more humans and more digital, both biological and digital consciousness, and why we should become a multi-planet species and a multicellular species, is so that we can understand the nature of the universe. And then, in order for that to occur, then we have to make sure that things are good on Earth. We don't want Earth to disappear. So, sustainable energy is important for ensuring the long-term viability of Earth, and making life multiplanetary is important for extending consciousness, and ultimately we want to go and visit other star systems to see if there are alien civilizations there that perhaps still exist or perhaps died out millions of years ago.